For generations, Canada and the United States have shared more than just a border. They have been bound by common values, a shared language, and a deep sense of partnership that has shaped the destinies of both nations. From bustling cities to quiet rural towns, the ties between these neighbors have been woven into the fabric of daily life. Stretching for thousands of miles, the world's longest undefended border has long stood as a symbol of trust and cooperation, a testament to the peace that has defined North America for centuries. But today, on September 10, 2025, a new and powerful force is reshaping this historic friendship: water. What was once taken for granted is now at the center of a growing crisis. Canada, blessed with an abundance of fresh water, now finds itself guarding a resource that its southern neighbor, the United States, desperately needs to survive. The vast lakes and rivers that once seemed endless are now a source of national pride and anxiety. The conversation between these two allies has shifted dramatically. What was once a model of friendly cooperation has become a tense standoff over water, the very essence of life and prosperity. For years, scientists and environmentalists warned of dwindling water supplies in the American West, yet those warnings were often ignored, dismissed as distant threats. Now, that future has arrived with a vengeance. Rivers have run dry, farmland has turned to dust, and entire communities face the specter of collapse. The United States, once confident in its own resources, now faces unprecedented droughts and the looming collapse of its agricultural heartland. In desperation, it looks north to Canada's rivers, lakes, and glaciers as a potential lifeline. Suddenly, Canada's water has become a strategic global asset, drawing intense international scrutiny and sparking debates in parliaments and newsrooms around the world. The United States, once the dominant partner in this relationship, now finds itself in the unfamiliar position of a desperate supplicant. This reversal has created a dangerous new power dynamic, with both nations struggling to adapt. This conflict is not just about politics or economics. It touches every aspect of life on both sides of the border. From the water that families drink, to the crops that feed millions, to the industries that drive both economies, nothing is untouched. It's a story shaped by climate change, economic desperation, and the fundamental right of a nation to control its own resources. Water, once a symbol of abundance, is now a source of tension and uncertainty. The world watches anxiously, knowing that the outcome of this standoff will set a precedent for how nations everywhere handle the coming era of global water disputes. The era of easy assumptions about US-Canada relations is over. What was once a model of peaceful coexistence is now a testing ground for the challenges of a changing planet. The age of the water wars has begun, and the front line is the 49th parallel, a new chapter in the story of two nations and a warning to the world about the price of ignoring nature's limits. The water crisis exploded onto the world stage, dominating headlines and sparking urgent debates across North America. What had once been a simmering concern about droughts and shrinking reservoirs suddenly became a full-blown emergency, with communities scrambling for solutions and governments under intense pressure to act. The situation escalated dramatically with Donald Trump's return to American politics. His presence reignited old controversies and introduced new tensions as he made water security a central theme of his campaign, promising bold action to his supporters. Trump proposed massive, unprecedented engineering projects to divert vast quantities of Canadian water southward, presenting these plans as essential for American survival. He argued that without drastic measures, American cities and farms would face disaster, and he vowed to do whatever it took to secure water for the United States. This was not a polite request for cooperation, but a forceful demand, treating Canada's water as a commodity to be bought, sold, or seized if necessary. The message was clear. America's needs came first, no matter the cost. Trump specifically targeted the historic Columbia River Treaty, a cornerstone of cross-border water management. He threatened to ignore its obligations entirely if Canada refused to comply, putting decades of careful negotiation at risk. As a result, talks between the two countries froze. Decades of cooperation and trust evaporated almost overnight, leaving both sides at an impasse and the future of water sharing in doubt. Canadians reacted with outrage, seeing Trump's plan as not only ecological vandalism, but also a direct attack on their national identity and sovereignty. Protests erupted, with citizens demanding their leaders stand firm. The fallout was swift and severe. uncertainty gripped communities and industries on both sides of the border. Families worried about their future, businesses faced closures, and a deep fracture in trust opened between the two nations. Trump's characteristic bravado turned a complex technical issue into a political firestorm, forcing Canada into a defensive stance and fueling heated debates in both countries. The era of quiet diplomacy and mutual respect in water management was over, replaced by confrontation and uncertainty. The future of cross-border cooperation now hung in the balance. Under pressure, Prime Minister Mark Carney responded with clarity. Canada's water is not for sale. He declared Canadian rivers would not be diverted for another nation's crisis. Environmental groups and Indigenous leaders rallied behind him, citing catastrophic ecological and cultural consequences. First Nations asserted their treaty rights and sovereignty, making diversion legally and morally impossible. This alliance created a united front Washington couldn't ignore. Carney's leadership reframed the issue as responsible stewardship, not anti-Americanism. Canada sent a clear message. It would defend its water at all costs. The standoff quickly brought hardship to millions of Americans. Farmers in California and Arizona, already rationing water, saw hopes for relief vanish. The agricultural crisis deepened, food prices surged, and layoffs hit food processing and logistics. Communities shifted from prosperity to survival, with job security evaporating. Fresh produce became a luxury, and the promise of cheap, abundant food began to crumble. Political pressure mounted as the crisis became a daily reality. The freeze on the Columbia River Treaty threatened electricity prices and flood management in the Pacific Northwest. The carefully balanced system protecting riverside communities was now in jeopardy. The water war's consequences were felt far beyond the border. The escalating water conflict has captured the attention of Wall Street and global investors like never before. What was once considered a local issue has now become a headline topic in financial circles, with analysts and traders closely monitoring every development. Water, once simply a local utility taken for granted, is now being redefined as a volatile global commodity. Its value fluctuates with climate, politics, and demand, making it a new frontier for speculation and investment. The recent US-Canada dispute over water rights triggered a dramatic shift. Capital quickly fled water-intensive US industries, causing layoffs and uncertainty, while investment poured into Canada, seen as a safer bet. Investors now view Canada as a stable, water-rich haven, fueling rapid growth in agriculture, advanced water technology, and infrastructure projects. Canadian companies are expanding, and new startups are emerging to meet global demand. International corporations are rethinking their supply chains, eyeing Canada for expansion and relocating operations to tap into its abundant water resources. Canada's firm stance on water protection, backed by new policies and regulations, makes it increasingly attractive for sustainable investment. Green funds and ethical investors are flocking to Canadian projects. But this surge of attention is a double-edged sword, intensifying both pressure and scrutiny on Canadian leaders. Every decision is watched, debated, and critiqued on the world stage. The world's wealthiest individuals and corporations now covet Canada's so-called blue gold, driving up land prices and sparking competition for access to clean water. The fight for water sovereignty has become a truly global issue, with high-stakes players and governments watching closely, each maneuvering for influence and access. Canada's challenge is clear: protect its precious water resources as the world lines up for a share, balancing economic opportunity with environmental responsibility and national security. The water dispute has transformed the US-Canada relationship from partnership to rivalry. The 49th parallel is now a defensive line, not just a border. Canadian policymakers can no longer assume American interests align with theirs. The aggressive US stance has eroded generations of goodwill. Every negotiation, trade, security, environment is now colored by the water conflict. Trust is damaged, and new agreements are approached with caution. Day-to-day cooperation is slower, more transactional. This crisis will define relations for decades, as climate change intensifies US pressure. The challenge: find a new equilibrium that respects sovereignty and acknowledges need. Without mutual respect, the world's longest undefended border risks becoming a symbol of division. The world is watching the US-Canada water standoff as a test case for future resource conflicts. The EU sees Canada's defense as reinforcing national sovereignty over resources. China, facing its own water shortages, is learning from the dispute and quietly supporting Canada. The crisis spotlights Arctic sovereignty as melting ice exposes new freshwater reserves. Other Arctic nations are watching, knowing this is a prelude to future competition. Canada is being pushed to diversify alliances, leveraging its resource wealth for new partnerships. In a climate-changed world, those who control water will wield real power. Rebuffed by Canada, the US must solve its water crisis alone. Desalination is possible but costly and energy-intensive, with major environmental downsides. Water recycling and conservation are more sustainable but slow and expensive. The economic fallout from inaction is severe: agricultural collapse, job losses, and food insecurity. Communities are pitted against each other in a desperate fight for water. The American dream of endless abundance faces a harsh reality check. By trying to pressure Canada, the US lost a chance for partnership and now pays the price. The lesson: in a world of shared challenges, sovereignty and cooperation are both essential for survival.